Well, hello and welcome to Andy McNulty from Touchstay, who is joining me to talk about, well, we're going to be talking about Tumbleweed Town, Andy. So
Hello.
before we explain that, welcome. How's it going back in Blighty?
Back in Blighty is, I would say, the new normal. I think we're all getting used to this new normal. We've just gone into our second lockdown. It's about a week old, but it feels like there's no change outside. I still see lots of people and lots of cars. I think we just become a bit normal, a bit blasé about it, which in some ways is a bit worrying. If only we'd all do it properly, it wouldn't need a second lockdown.
Yeah,
Um,
same here actually. I drove down to. I mean, we're sort of out in the boonies, but I drove down to a nearby town yesterday and could not believe the traffic that was on the roads. And everybody's heading up to cottage country, coming up for the weekend, and yet our numbers are just rising exponentially. And it's all there's nothing up here, or there wasn't until all these people started driving up. So we shall see. We shall see what happens. And then, of course, you've got the what's happening in the US with their Thanksgiving next week, following week. So I understand there's going to be sort of 50 million people traveling in the US. So we'll see
oh
how it.
wow!
Yeah.
I thought you were going to mention with the politics, but let's not do that. Let's steer away from that one. The pandemic is enough to worry about. I shouldn't laugh. Some serious stuff going on, but yeah, we have adapted, haven't we? I think that's the best thing about us humans is we shift and adapt. Um, I perfectly realise there's lots of businesses that are struggling and lots of people that are struggling, but we all end up having that fighting spirit. So I think it's really interesting, actually, kind of all come together. I attended a webinar yesterday, and it was with an organisation called Premier Cottages here in the UK, and it was very much about collaboration, on leaning on each other in these times to try and figure out how you navigate issues and problems and things together. And it's not just business stuff; it's also just like I'm struggling, with mental stuff. I can't figure out what to do in my business because of X, and it's really interesting how it brings out the best in people as well as some negative stuff as well.
Oh, you're quite right. I mean, this afternoon we have a meeting with 9 other cottage rental agencies here in Ontario, and we started to meet back in February, March. We're locking down here. We're all losing business. We need to write to the government. We need to talk to MPs,
Absolutely.
and we did that, and things happened. So we've now continued to meet, and so yes, we have a meeting this afternoon. So yes, the collaboration that has come out of all this. If there's something positive, certainly for us, that is the big positive.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
So today, I wanted to talk about the wow that should happen, and I've said it: the wow that starts long before you open the door. So I want to come at this as a guest, because I know you've been a guest in many properties, and I have too. And I thought this is a good turnaround to actually talk about our personal experiences of being a guest, but focusing specifically on that time period between booking and arriving. Because I know when we did the presentation, gosh, was it 2 years ago now, or maybe?
I think it was three.
Oh,
Was it three?
really?
It's a long time ago. Well, relative.
Yeah, we did a presentation that was you and me and Tyann Marsink, and then Jessica Vozell came along and jumped in your place for the same presentation delivered in Bend to the Northwest Association of Vacation Rentals. And in that presentation, we were talking about love languages, basically. And I won't go into that one because there's a couple of podcasts out there about love languages, and I will put the links to that so you can go and check them out. But in that presentation, Andy, you talked about well, what I got from it was you called it Tumbleweed Town. And there was a wonderful image of this sort of desert with a tumbleweed leaning up against an beaten up old gas station. and it really came to mind, or brought to mind, this huge gap there is often between somebody making a booking and between them arriving at the property. And I think what you were saying, if you don't do something in that gap, you're going to leave people in limbo and wondering what the heck is happening. So do you want to elaborate on that a bit? And, why did you include that? And how important is it for you?
It's quite interesting, actually. When I think of that picture, I think of the cartoon movie Cars, and there's the bit where Radiator Springs sort of is almost like people don't stop there anymore. It's like, it's this ghost town. That's the vision I have. So that the image, as you said, was just like some tumbleweed rolling through this old rickety sort of shack that was left there. And yeah, it's a metaphor for, I don't know if metaphor is the right word, but for that experience that a guest often has between the moment they go through the checkout page of a booking and the time that they walk through the front door of the place they're staying at. And it often is that period where nothing happens. Like, I mean, life goes on and you're busy and you're working, etc. But you don't actually hear from your host or manager. Or at least I've never, bar a couple of occasions, which we'll obviously run into later. But there's that void where you're not spoken to, or you're not communicated with, or you're not engaged with. And it seemed like such a missed opportunity for both parties, both the guests and the host, to nurture some kind of relationship. There's lots that can be achieved between that period. And guests, like, we want to feel excited about our stay, but we don't. We have this ghost town. So yeah, hence the photo.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, I mean, going way back to that, the time I met Tyann was at a home away conference way back. It's been 7-8 years ago, and I did a presentation on the Wow experience, and it was all about, when you get there, you open the door, and you want your guests to go, wow, this is so amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But that was at a time when the majority of homes didn't have that wow. And now we're all working to make sure that the door opens and it smells wonderful and it looks wonderful, and the bedding is fantastic, so it feels great too. You're touching all the different senses. But to me, if you haven't created that engagement, that relationship between the booking, you've created a first impression that's got back way back, that's going to be hard to dispel, however nice it smells and however wonderful it looks. Because if the guest already has something in their head that says, well, I had to contact this company, or I had to contact this owner and say, did I actually make a booking with you? Because I can't find, I can't find any confirmation. I might have put it in a file folder and I've totally forgotten about it. And now I'm having to search for it. And now I have to find you and contact you and worry, perhaps, that I didn't make a booking at all, or you've lost it. I say all these things because it's happened to me. So, and I'm going to come back to a couple of those experiences in a minute. What about you? Have you had that? You have had that experience, obviously, of being in that limbo place.
Yeah, I would say 95% of my stays have been that way, and I think it's a missed opportunity for the host or manager to also, dare I suggest, make a little bit more money in that period. It's it's the time where I'm thinking about my vacation, and I'm probably willing to maybe check in early and pay a little bit more. Well, pandemic period aside, of course, but book a tour or book a place. And I think it's a missed opportunity. So, and yet, despite that, to your question, 95% of the time, it's been the tumbleweed period, from my experience, anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll give you the one that sticks in my mind, and I have mentioned it before, and I probably will mention it again. And and this is why, because I was, it was upsetting was going to Como for Antonio's summit last year.
Mhm.
And I'd been to Como many, many years previously. 25 years ago, we used to go every year down to a little lake near Como. And so this time around, my eldest son was going to come up with his wife and my grandchild from Berlin, and we were going to uh, go. I was going to go to the conference, and then we were having a few days in Como, a very precious few days because that's all we had to do a bit of, do a little trip down memory lane and go to this campground that we'd stayed in 25 years previously. Look out some of the restaurants. Go to we all remember taking this boat trip from the harbourfront in Como, and I just remember visiting different towns and being able to get off and go have a wander and then get back on the boat and go somewhere else. So this was in my head that this was what we were going to do, but it was 25 years ago. I vague memories, and we only had a couple of days. So my thought was, I'd book this place and get some information beforehand. And of course, I know I can go onto Google. I can do it myself. But I was really disappointed that I made this booking and it was for October. In September, I had to search, and this is what I said earlier on, I had to search around and find this booking. I couldn't remember if I booked directly or if I booked through a platform. And I couldn't remember my VRBO account because I don't use it much. So I figured I'd book direct, and that was where the stress started coming in, because I thought, oh my God, we're going in 3 weeks. And I've had nothing from them. They hadn't taken the final payment, I suddenly realized. And we've had nothing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Now you've said that, I have had that experience when I went to. In fact, it was New Orleans, I think, where we may have given the love languages presentation there as well. And I'd stayed. I booked with Tyann, and we were staying. And Tyann had brought her husband Nat with us as well. So there were 3 of us. But I didn't ever get a booking confirmation, and I always worried that it hadn't gone through for whatever reason, but I'd seen it come out of my bank account. And I don't know, I probably stupidly, naively didn't bother to think, well, actually, I wonder if there's something weird going on here. But it didn't turn out to be that way. It was perfectly fine. And just before I was about to travel, I got that communication. But it was weird. It was very odd to have that uncertainty and then no communication. And a scroll thinking, wait, did I actually book this? I can relate to that totally. And I don't think it's, somebody said to me once recently, don't discount when somebody tells you something about your product that is negative, because it could be that there are 100 other people who feel the same but haven't bothered to get in touch with you.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of interesting that we're saying this. I haven't heard anyone else say it, but I bet there are lots of other people who've had the same experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going back to this Como experience, what I would have loved was, and I did, when I finally got in touch with them, I said, I'd expected to hear something from you with some information perhaps on the things that we can do and see in the area. And I got a very pleasant email back saying, oh, don't worry, there'll be plenty of brochures in the apartment when you arrive. And I've got 5 days, 2 of which are at the conference, and 3 of which I want to spend all my time with my family and seeing these places. I don't want to have to spend time looking everything up. I want to hear you about where you think we should go and have a meal, where what are the best times to get the ferry up to Bellagio? Where should we go and have lunch in Bellagio? That sort of thing. And it would have been so simple. So that's my experience. Do you have a good one?
I do. Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's the one that I mention most often when we're talking about these kind of subjects, and it's the experience I had staying with a business called Beside the Sea in the UK, run by Richard and Sophie, and actually also not just Richard and Sophie, but Arthur as well.
Oh, yeah.
And now Dougal, their dog, so Arthur's their son, but Dougal is their dog. It used to be Oscar, but Oscar sadly passed, so Dougal is the new member of the family. And the positive part of that was that I knew when I booked that it was Richard, Sophie, Arthur, and Dougal. And I knew throughout the pre-arrival period that it was Richard, Sophie, Arthur, and Dougal. And when I got there, it was all four of them as well. It was like a completely consistent experience, so much so that it's etched on my memory and that I talk about it whenever I can. And there's really a couple of examples in that. The first one is that they've branded it all the way through as them. And that's kind of really powerful because they have 45 properties. So it's not like they're just one or two and they're being nice and personable because they can do, because they only have one or two. No, they've got 45 properties that they're managing. But it feels personal all the way through, and that's their brand. And that's what all their comments say. All of their reviews talk about that. So one, it's like a really powerful branding thing, which connects you as the guest to the place you're going, because you just feel like it's going to be a lovely experience. And then it is. And then you remember it. And then you want to go back. So that's the first thing. But the second thing they do is they have emails that come to you before you arrive. In fact, when you book, I can't remember which one they send, but they send a short guide, like a magazine kind of page turning guide, with all of the interesting things you can do, and it's very visual and colourful, and there are beautiful shots, photos that they can take in that part of the world. The sun sets, the sun rises. It's a lovely colorscape that they capture there, and they've managed to bring that all into. Did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I was going to say, was is it, that was something that's actual published piece of material they sent to you? Or was it?
Exactly. It was actually an insider guide that I used to do a few years ago, which I've stopped doing. But they've continued to do that. It's actually published on issue.com, and it's just one of those kind of nice magazine twirling. You can thumb through it, and those sort of things work when they're nice and visual. They're not that brilliant at reading lots of detail, but if it's lots of experience related stuff and getting you in the mood and just quick tips on what to do, it's brilliant. And so that's what they do. So you already have in mind the sort of things. And what was even better was that when we last stayed with them, it was during the summer, so it was pandemic time, but you could still travel and stay as a family. But all the places that you would ordinarily go to aren't necessarily open, or if they are, particular restaurants, they aren't as easy to get into. So having had the information in advance, it was much easier to book a couple of places and make sure that well in advance of our trip, we were going to be able to go to some of these nice restaurants. So that was brilliant as well. So it's about like falling in love with the idea and notion of what they are and the place they live in, but also the things that I can do and see and book ahead of stay. And it's brilliant. And they do that consistently. So even after you've left, you're then, I get them. And it's not an email list I go, oh, I want to unsubscribe from that. It's one of those that pops and I go, I want to read that one. And you open it and it's just brilliant. So yeah, that's a really, really positive example of what they do. But the other one I've had is, it's not one that I've stayed at yet, but it's interesting that they've taken the same approach of, and I know it because they're a customer of ours, so I know what they do, even though I haven't stayed there. They do the same thing when they're in Costa Rica. They do the same thing where after you've booked, there's this series of very visual things. So it's not necessarily like go here and do that and etc. It's like, what are the scenes that are going to greet you or await you when you arrive? And it does nothing more than get you as the guest to go, oh wow, like I've booked that place, I'm going to be there soon. And it does nothing more than that. But that's brilliant. That in itself is something really powerful, way more than words. So that's an interesting one as well. And they're a big organization that, well, I say big, we're talking relative to this industry. They're about 80 properties.
Hmm.
So again, they're doing it just through simple programming of emails. It's nothing more complex than that, and they're not doing a personal one to me each time that I've booked. It's the same series, and it's seasonally changed. So it may be the same series, but if I'm there at a different time, I won't get the same one that I got last time. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, and that is really easy to set up.
Totally.
Takes a little while, but these automated emails are easy to set up. We're doing it at the moment because I have to admit that our business has been going for nearly 18 years, and it's only in the last year that we have started to bridge the tumbleweed gap.
Well, it's like you said. I mean, to date, it's all about it's been all about the pre-booking experience, website being a nice, easy experience, professional looking photos, and then the property being well staged, well managed, clean, as you expect. So it's not really a surprise, but I think, every time we iterate into a more positive version of ourselves, there's other stuff left, and this is the one of the things that I think has been overlooked and now will have its day.
Yeah, I think it often seems like this is going to be difficult. This is just too difficult to do. But it is. We've started a sort of series of 90 days. We're just working 90 days out. So what are we going to do for the next 90 days in terms of content creation? And so now building into that 90-day content creation, the drip that will go out to guests between booking and their stay. And I know at the moment we're a little bit behind the curve because we've been sideswiped really by the amount of early bookings we've got for next year. Usually our season doesn't start till January, February, and we start really booking out. But September, October, everybody wants to book for next summer. So we're a little bit behind and really trying to fill that gap just with a general drip campaign to our whole list. Absolutely everybody that's coming is getting something every 2 weeks.
That's
so
nice.
Not generally everybody that's coming, everybody on our mailing list is getting something every 2 weeks, actually driving them back to the website, getting them to look at the content on the website. So, at the moment, we're driving them back to winter content. So there may be people who've booked for next year and they may be not interested in how to buy a pair of snowshoes, which is the article I'm moment, or seven outdoor skating trails. But it's engagement. It's getting them to know that we are still out there. You booked with us, we're still here for you. But I wanted to move on actually and talk about the sorts of things that we can actually do. And this is hosts and managers, because these things can scale. So what have you got some examples of what you'd like to see, and maybe some examples of what people actually are doing?
One of the really
And just coming back on that, Richard and Sophie have been on the podcast, and I will put a link to their episode because that's really interesting, because they do talk about exactly what you were explaining. So,
and before I give you the example of one of the things that I've seen someone do recently that's quite scalable, I just wanted to touch again on that Richard and Sophie thing, because what they do is when they're out and about, they just take photos of things. And on the same webinar that I mentioned earlier that I was on yesterday, in fact, it's the head of that organization. She's very dog friendly, and she's often out walking, and she takes her camera, and it's just her phone, right? It's nothing else. But whenever she's got a great shot that would appeal to dog walkers or just walkers in general, she just takes a photo and she puts it on her Facebook page, and it's a way of just continuing that very visual feel of the place. And so it's not necessarily touching me as a guest that's about to stay there, but it's me as a past guest and that might want to go there. So I think hooking around your theme is really interesting, and that can be a property manager as well. I mean, you've got people in your team that have phones and that understand the kind of guests that stay with you, and if you're out, then whether it's a great restaurant or a bar or whatever. I think that's interesting. It's the power of photos. Anyway, the one that I wanted to talk about was the one that Tyann who's our community ambassador, does. She sends people a postcard, a physical postcard, which lands through the mailbox onto your door, onto your doorstep. And my first thought was, like, what postcasts, like scalability? Are you mad? And and typically Tyann, like, she figured it out, and she was just like, no, it's really easy. I'm like, how? I just use a service called Banner Season. Bannerseason.com. In fact, she's got a link that you can use if you wanted to try it. Bannerseason.com/Tyann, Tyann. And it's pretty much an automated process. So, any booking that you get, she's able to feed that into Banner Season, and Banner Season will take care of sending out the postcard with the message that you want, etc., with the design you want. And she just happens to have the postcard going out with the hiking trail on there. And she knows that that's part of what her guests do when they come. And that sort of thing is so old-fashioned in one sense, to get something sort of tangible, yet very modern in its way of scaling it and delivering it, and high impact simply because it doesn't really happen much these days. And I thought it was a really, really smart idea that was high impact, scalable, that would just put a smile on your face if you got it. It would just be, wow.
Well, out of the blue, you're just reminded of what's upcoming. You're reminded of your upcoming vacation.
Yeah.
So you might not have been thinking about it at all, but all of a sudden it's just like, wow, it's only so many weeks away, and how lovely it is to get this. And I would be blown away by something like that coming through the door, through the letterbox.
Yeah, definitely. And sort of occasionally you might get people who would go, oh, that's clearly automated. But I think we all get that. We all understand that. But it doesn't stop the fact that Tyann thought of them, put it in place, made sure it happened, and it landed on your doorstep. It's like the thought that counts more than necessarily, is it an automated thing, or did she really write that? Because I think we're all cynical and we go, well, she didn't write that. But it's nice nonetheless to get something like that. So I thought that was quite interesting when I was talking with her about it, that it could have that high impact regardless of what you thought about, did she write it or not.
And I've seen these postcards, and they're so beautifully done, and they're so professionally done. It's not just a sort of postcardy snap that you pick up off a stand. It is a little piece of artwork, and I am very impressed.
In fact, there's this right here, which Tyann sent after she came to stay here in the UK when we were on the Virgin Startup Accelerator, and she came for one of the weeks, and she managed throughout the course of that week, without us knowing, to capture photos of the whole experience, and then wrote us. It is a machine written. It's printed. Dear Andy and Joe, keep kicking, expletive. You've got this, Tyann. And then on the back, like, the photo of Joe and I can't get this camera right, but branded on the back, look, Tyann, abandoned, boring. And I thought it was really, this is exactly the kind of thing. And this dropped. And even though I know Tyann and love her to bits, I wasn't expecting that. And that, well, you can see how I'm talking about it and see how I've got it up there on the shelf. So that's the kind of impact that it has.
I think that's amazing. And typical Tyann, every idea she has it has a clear goal in mind and executed perfectly.
Yeah.
I just wanted to give you an example, something that we are doing that really came out of this summer. And I think this is scalable to everybody. And we had we had a lot of last minute bookings, but we had a lot of bookings in place that had been in for a long time. And we had not been sending people much information beforehand. but we were finding people calling up because they'd arrived at the place. Well, we wanted to rent a boat, but there is nothing available because there was just a huge influx of traffic into our area this summer that everything was booked up. You could not rent a boat. You couldn't rent a Sea-Doo. You couldn't even rent a canoe. You couldn't even buy a canoe. And so we decided for this year, for this upcoming year, we're going to be sending out a list, and it's very simple. We'll just do a PDF list of all the rental outlets in the area with an encouragement to book early. If you want to rent a boat, book early. Here's where you can go and get the boats. So we're going to be doing a PDF download. It's going to be on the website, and then we'll be sending everybody a note to say either download this or go to the website, book early. And we're also going to be working with some of the outlets to get them a small discount as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's such a simple thing that absolutely anybody could do. Just don't let them wait to arrive to see a list of rentals for bikes or even you mentioned excursions. You want to go on a whale watching trip or a dolphin watching trip. These things have to be booked in advance.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've got a short space of time between, in the time that you're there, you're going to miss out. And
yeah, and you'd be sitting there thinking, if only they told me. Why didn't they tell me? It's such a simple thing. I think it's brilliant.
The other thing we're going to start doing is it'll be an automated email, and it'll go out very shortly after they book. And it's going to say, we're so pleased that you've booked. You must be starting to get excited. We'd like you to tell us a bit more about why you're going to this location, what you'd like to do when you're there, what activities, what you'd like to see, and try and get some information back from them, because then that we can feed into our automated system. So if they express an interest in fishing, it will go into the fishing funnel.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have some information
That's nice.
on fishing and fishing licenses, getting a fishing license where you get, because we've had people arrive and then call us and say, oh, I didn't know I had to have a license. Where do I go and get one? Well, in fact, you can get them online. So if they knew that beforehand, but we want to find out what people want so that we can really target their interests. Are you having a celebration? Because if they're having a celebration, then we send a card or balloons. And
I think it's brilliant because if you think about that whole process, it's quite sophisticated, yet and requires setup. But once it's done, it's operating for you, isn't it?
yeah.
I mean, aside from if I've got a birthday, if you've got a birthday, someone has to then take that, put the order in for the birthday cake or whatever that you're going to surprise them with. But the bit that satisfies their type, am I a skier? Am I a hiker? Am I a fisher? Whatever, and been getting content automatically from you that serves you really interesting and informative, important things you need to do, the fishing license, without you needing to lift a finger. That's brilliant. But it does require a bit of thought. That's the thing I think that often stops people doing these things, is that you mentioned it earlier in something you said, that it's like the thinking about it that's the hard bit, the actual, oh my goodness, what have I got to do? But as with everything in life, if you just kind of clear your deck and focus and sit down and map it out, it doesn't end up being that difficult. It's the frazzled, I've got too much to do, I've got to do something else, that's the overwhelming bit. But when you map it out and you do it and you actually put in place a process, it's brilliant for you afterwards, because then you can just sit back, periodically update the content, of course, like keep it fresh. But it's I think it's great.
Well, it's just that it's the work up front. And this is a great time, certainly for us, great time of year for us to do all the work up front, because it's not as quiet as it usually is, but it is a quieter time of year. So if we can get all this done up front, when we do get into January, and then we're into a process of dripping out these things, asking questions, doing short surveys. I mean, we have a license with SurveyMonkey, and it's not hugely expensive, but it means every so often we send out a survey and ask people what do they like, what do they enjoy most when they go away, what do they miss, because we out here, if you go 2 hours north of Toronto, you might miss McDonald's or Starbucks.
Celebrate.
But it could mean that it just helps us to decide how we're going to treat every one of our guests as an individual.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Forcing you to think about not just like the individual guest, but forcing you to think about your process.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to have to figure something out and really deep dive into it, because it will only improve things, and it will be painful and difficult to start with, like getting it all done, but the output is just it has so much value.
Yeah. So do you have any other suggestions, ideas?
Well, send a Touch Day digital guidebook, of course. I mean, why would you not do that? Sorry, I had to say that.
No, absolutely, because I'm moving on to that anyway. That yes, I mean we use the digital guide. So we actually send, and that's interesting because I know that Tyann sends hers out right after somebody's booked, I believe.
She does.
And then she sends the link again. So every time she has correspondence with them, she reminds them that they've got this, because people have things on their phones and they'll download it and get all excited for 5 minutes, and then the squirrel comes along and then they do it again, and then they'll call you. Then they'll call us and say, "You haven't sent us anything." It's like, "Yes, we did."
Yeah, 6 times.
I remember Tyann saying that she does send it again and again. So it's a reminder. But yeah, tell us a little bit about Touch Day, Andy, because we find it absolutely invaluable for our guests.
Yeah, well, it's a digital guidebook, so it replaces what you've got in the home, the paper manual, but increasingly can replace other things you're doing. So, that idea of collecting information from the guest pre-arrival, that can be something that you can put in the guide. So that if people are perusing that, they may see the section and think, oh, there's information they need from me. Click the link and populate the information. I had one really interesting one recently. It was a customer who has a spa on site. They have 16 cottages in this beautiful part of the UK. And on site, they've got a gym and spa and pool, but with 16 cottages and multiple guests, particularly in this time of year, this pandemic period, you can't kind of all descend on the spa at once. So he has in there how to book your spa appointment. And he said it's a brilliant way of the guests into the Touch Day guide, because I tell them they have to go in there to book their spa. So they can book out the spa for our slot. And it's the only way you can do it. So, and you go in there and then you book a time. You say, like, I don't know, 3 p.m. for an hour, I want it. I put my cottage I'm staying at and my details and the password he gives you, because it is something he wants to be sure that you've been given legitimate access to. And boom, it's booked for you. And then he has a little video inside his guide, which is it's fantastic. I love these things that people do. It's brilliant. He's literally him to camera, no fancy production or anything like that. He's just got him to camera, walking to the front of the spa and saying, to get into the spa, here's the code you need. Do it. Turn the dial clockwise, enter the spa, and then you see him entering the spa, and then you see him going to the section where you change it. Here's where you change it. Here's where you put your shoes. And it's just, it's wonderful. It's like leaves nothing to chance. I know exactly what I'm going to do. So that's the sort of thing that you can put inside Touch Day, as well as check-in time and Wi-Fi code and all of that kind of stuff. But I want to touch on what we were talking about there with Tyann. She doesn't just send it multiple times. Well, and also she does send it multiple times, but she automates it. So it's not any physical effort, manual effort. She just automates her PMS owner reservations, who we're integrated with. So she just sets the workflow inside owner reservations so that it goes out on the days that she wants it to go out. But, and this is the brilliance of Tyann again, is she doesn't just say, thanks for your booking and here's a digital guidebook. She says a lead-in to why it's valuable to the guest. So I can't remember the exact words, but it's to the effect of, we've created this great guide which includes the following things, and just bullets the 5 frequently asked questions that she gets. So she knows these are things people are flagging that they ask ordinarily, and she just puts it in there and says, you'll get the answer here, click the link. And so she gets so much more engagement from it. And I think sometimes we feel that we just need to tell the guest it's there and then they'll use it. But we don't. We need to give guests a reason, like you said, because the squirrel will go past the window and they'll get distracted. So if you can plant the seed in their mind, regardless of whether they look at it now or before they travel, because they've had that thing which says, this is useful to you. And if it is useful to you, know what it's like. If something's useful to you, you remember it, even though you don't necessarily use it now. You go, oh, I saw that 2 months ago. I go back to it, and then I use it. So I think that approach is really interesting. So it's not just about the wonderful things you can put inside your guide, but it's about how you get it to them and how you make it valuable to them.
That's right. It's not static. It's not a static thing. It's a living. To me, it's a living document, and you bring people into that life, I guess.
Yeah.
We're adding more and more video. And
it can be humorous stuff as well. So there's a guy called Jim Hinton, who he's one of our Touch Day rock stars, we call them, who are the people that join our private Facebook group, and he's one of those that's done so much in his guide. It's brilliant. And he there's a section on how to operate the hot tub, and it's of course something that I'm sure you know, when you tell guests how to do it, they just ignore it, don't they? They're still like, I don't know, drink their beer glass in there and drop it and break it, whatever they do. But the way Jim's done it is he's done a video, and he's done a few iterations. The first one I saw was a video of him just explaining to camera like what to do and how to do it, and it was great. But he's amped it up a bit, where he's done like a fast forward version of it. So it's almost like Jim's like running around, he's opening the lid, and it's quite funny to watch. But because the video is quite long and there's not that many instructions in it, you can fast forward it and not lose any of the impact. And he's got like little pointers saying like, do this and do this, and it's fantastic. And you say, oh well, Jim's he's got one property in Asheville, and he's got the time to do this. Like I don't, I'm a property manager, 300 properties, I don't have the time. Well, do it once and it's there forever. Yeah. And it it doesn't need to be you. Like chances are, if you've got 300 properties, you've got some people who are inspecting properties and who can do that while they're there. I just thought that was a funny example to share.
Well, if it's possible to share Jim's Touch Day guide.
Oh yeah, it's actually, if you go to touchday.com/example-guides, you'll see there's 9, I think, that we've got on there that represent good things in different ways. Like one's got Japanese translation in it, for example. Another one, Jim's, is, I think we flag humor in video. And you'll see his is called Asheville Hideaway.
Okay, I will put that on the show notes. Something else I want to say to listeners just about Touch Day. You know that I love Touch Day and use it within my own company and promote the heck out of it because I do love it so much. But we've on Vacation Rental Formula, we've just created a new business page for Touch Day, and on that page you're going to find a video that I did with Andy. And also another Andy, that was Andy Medic from Sea Change Vacation Rentals. And you'll have met Andy Medic in a previous podcast, because Andy Medic is what we call a super user of Touch Stay. And I interviewed both of them, Andy McNulty as the founder of Touch Stay, co-founder of Touch Stay, and Andy Medic as a user. So you can hear a little bit more from both sides. So I'll put the link to that business page as well, so you can go take a look at that. So Andy, our time's up, unfortunately. I can't believe how 45 minutes just
Correct.
whooshes past. But it's always an absolute pleasure to talk to you. It's been a while. It's been over 100 episodes since we last checked.
Oh my goodness. You've been cranking out the content.
I have indeed, yes. So yeah, always a pleasure. Lovely to talk to you, and always to hear about Tyan's uh, what Tyan is doing. Oh, and yes, if you go to that business page, you're going to see links to all the podcast episodes I've done with Andy and with Tyan. Loads of super useful information in there. So go check that out. Andy, it's been an absolute pleasure. Love talking to you, and we will talk again very soon, I'm quite sure.
Thank you, Heather. It's a pleasure. Stay safe. See you later.
Thank you very much.